The last person Kaya expected to see standing in the dust-choked street of Copper Creek was the ghost of his one perfect night, holding the hand of a small boy who was the mirror of his own childhood. 5 years had carved canyons of hardship into the land and into Kaya's soul, but the sight of Elara froze time itself. The fierce Arizona sun, a merciless brass coin in a bleached-out sky, glinted off her unbound hair, the color of ripe wheat. But it was the desperate terror in her eyes that speared him. She was no longer the girl he'd met. At 30, her beauty was a sharper, more resilient thing, etched with a story he desperately needed to read. She clutched the boy's small hand, her posture a shield against the world. And the boy. He couldn't be more than 4. He had Kaya's jet-black hair, the same stubborn set to his jaw, and eyes that held the deep ancient brown of the mesas. He was a living memory. Memories, long buried under a cairn of survival, erupted. A single night 5 years past, during the great autumn dance in a neighboring village. He'd seen her across the fire, a vision in a blue calico dress, her laughter a sound that didn't belong to the harshness of the territory. He was a member's Apache tracker, quiet and solitary. She was the daughter of a boarding house owner from Silver City, just passing through. They talked for hours under a tapestry of cold, sharp stars, a conversation that felt like finding a missing piece of a song he'd always known. There had been one kiss by the creek, a silent, desperate promise made with touch alone. He had given her a carved stone token, a tiny bear, a symbol of strength and protection in his culture. He still carried its twin in his medicine pouch, a smooth, cold stone against his skin. Now, her phantom was flesh, and she was here, in this dying mining town where the wind whistled through the ribs of abandoned shacks. His eyes darted from her terrified face to the boy, and his blood ran cold. Tucked into the boy's leather belt was the very same bear token. Elara's gaze met his across the 20 yards of packed earth, a distance that felt like a lifetime. There was no smile of recognition, only a profound, bone-deep fear. She didn't just shake her head. Her hand went to the boy's shoulder and she mouthed a single, silent word that shattered the desert stillness. Run. Then she turned and hurried the boy down a narrow alley between the saloon and the assay office. Swallowed by the shadows, Kaya stood rooted, the heat of the sun suddenly meaningless against the cold dread coiling in his gut. The ghost had returned, and she hadn't just brought his heart with her. She had brought a secret, a son, and a warning that was meant for him. The stakes were no longer just about a lost love. They were about a debt from a past he had never fully escaped. A past that had just found him in the form of a small boy with his own eyes. Kaya found them in the livery. The air thick with the smell of hay, horse sweat, and profound neglect. A shaft of sunlight, full of swirling dust motes, cut through the gloom, illuminating a single stall in the far corner. He could hear the faint, hushed murmur of a woman's voice, soothing, desperate. He stepped into the light at the entrance of the stall. Elara whirled around, shoving the boy behind her skirts, a derringer appearing in her hand as if by magic. It trembled, but her aim at his heart was steady. "Stay back," she whispered, her voice hoarse with a fear that was days, maybe weeks. Old Kaya raised his hand slowly, palms out. He kept his eyes locked on hers, ignoring the gun. "Elara," he said, her name a foreign prayer on his tongue after so long. "You found me." His eyes flickered to the boy who peered from behind her, those ancient, familiar eyes wide with a child's uncomprehending fear. "You kept the token." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back furiously. The derringer lowered a fraction of an inch. "I had no choice. They were going to kill him." She swallowed hard, the sound loud in the quiet stable. Rafe Borland. The name was a punch to Kaya's gut. Borland was more than a cattle baron. He was a man who carved his empire from blood and intimidation. His land greed a poison seeping into the territory. His ranch, the Barbie, bordered the reservation, and his men were known for their cruelty. "Why?" Kaya asked, his voice low and careful, the voice he used when stalking prey. "Why does Borland care about you?" "About him?" He couldn't yet form the words "my son." He didn't at first, she said, her voice dropping to a haunted whisper. "After my father died, I managed the boarding house. Borland," he started coming around. "He decided he wanted me. He decided he wanted the property. When I refused him, he became obsessed." She drew a shaky breath. "Then, a month ago, a man came to see him. A man with a scarred face and eyes as cold as a snake's. After that meeting, Borland changed. He looked at Sam differently. He said the bloodline must end. He said the boy was a key to something he called the Asa Banu." Kaya felt the ground lurch beneath his feet. Asa Banu. The words were from a dialect spoken only by the elders of his band. It meant the waiting shadow. It was a legend, a shameful story of a lost Spanish convoy carrying a fortune in silver, guided and then betrayed by his own grandfather. The betrayal had cursed the mine, and the story was a buried secret, a ghost that haunted his family. "He knows who you are, Kaya," Elara breathed, her eyes wide with a horror that went beyond immediate threat. "He knows about your grandfather. He believes Sam is the last descendant of the guide, and that his blood is the key to finding the cursed silver." This wasn't just about prejudice or possession. This was a hunt rooted in a generations-old curse, a greed that had festered for decades. His son was not just an inconvenience. He was the quarry in a madman's treasure hunt. They fled into the broken hills, Kaya leading them on a path known only to the coyotes and the wind. He put Elara on his sturdy pinto and lifted Sam up to sit in front of her. The boy felt light as a bird in his arms, a profound fragility that sent a jolt of protective fury through him. As Kaya's hands brushed Elara's to pass the reins, a current, as sharp and real as the one 5 years ago, passed between them. Her eyes widened, and he knew she felt it too, the ghost of that night, now given flesh and desperate purpose. He pushed them hard, his mind reeling. The Asa Banu. How could Borland know? The scarred man was the Kia ghost from a past Kaya thought was dead. His name was Silas. He had been his grandfather's partner, the one who had escaped the rock slide, the one who had kept the legend alive, twisting it into a tale of cursed gold dot as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of blood and ochre. Kaya found the signs he'd been dreading, a boot print too fresh, the leather sole imprint sharp-edged. A juniper twig snapped at shoulder height, its broken end oozing sap like a tear. They were being tracked, and by someone who knew the land almost as well as he did. He set up a cold camp in a high crevice, a mere scrape in the cliff face hidden by a thicket of juniper. "We cannot light a fire," he said, his voice grim. "They are close." "Who?" Elara asked, clutching a sleeping Sam to her chest, using her own body to shield him from the chilling wind that snaked down from the peaks. "The scarred man, Silas. He was my grandfather's business partner. He believes in the curse. He believes the silver is his birthright and that our family stole it from him." A scuff of leather on stone, deliberate and out of place, echoed softly from the trail below. Kaya melted into the shadows, his knife seeming to appear in his hand from the very darkness itself. A figure emerged below, silhouetted against the twilight atoll. Gaunt man with a horrific scar that pulled his lip into a permanent, knowing sneer. Silas. He knelt, examining the ground where they had passed hours before. His fingers, long and pale like spiders, brushed the dust. Then he paused, picking up a small object. It glinted dully in the fading light. Sam's carved stone bear. The token had fallen. Silas smiled, a gruesome sight in the half-light. "I know you're here, boy," he called out, his voice like grinding stones, carrying easily in the thin air. "The child is the compass. The blood will show the way. I'll be taking him now." Kaya moved like a phantom. There was no war cry, only the deadly whisper of steel through air and the sickening thud of bodies colliding. The fight was brutal, silent, and efficient, a savage ballet of grabbing, stabbing, and grunting exertion. When it was over, Silas lay still in the dust, his cold eyes staring sightlessly at the emerging stars. Kaya knelt, pried the token from the dead man's grip, and tucked it back into his pouch. His hands were stained. He looked up at the crevice, meeting Elara's horrified gaze. "The first blood is spilled," he said, his voice grim and hollow. But Silas was just the hound. "The hunter is still coming. And now he knows we are here." The scent of blood was on the wind, and it would draw Borland in like a wolf to a wounded deer. With Silas dead, their flight became a desperate, headlong sprint. Borland would be enraged, his pursuit unrelenting. The death of his tracker was a challenge, a slap in the face that would demand a vicious response. Kaya abandoned his original plan for a safe canyon, leading them instead toward the one place even his own people avoided, the Cañon de los Espíritus, the Canyon of Spirits. "It is a place my people shun," he told Elara as they rode through the deepening night, the stars a brilliant cold blanket above. "The rocks remember the betrayal. The silver is said to be hidden there, and it is guarded by more than just legend. The wind speaks with the voices of the dead." The canyon was a gash in the earth, its walls of black basalt soaring hundreds of feet high, pressing in with a palpable weight. The moment they entered its mouth, the world changed. The warm, dry air grew cold and unnaturally still. The sounds of the desert, the crickets, the distant coyotes vanished, replaced by the eerie echo of their own horses' hooves, multiplied and distorted by the stone walls until it sounded like a phantom army was marching beside them. Behind them, all around them, they navigated the labyrinthine passages, Kaya relying on half-remembered warnings from his grandfather's drunken, guilt-ridden stories. "Turn where the stone looks like a weeping face. Avoid the passage that smells of old rain." Sam, unusually quiet and wide-eyed, kept pointing at the shadowy cliffs. "The dark men are watching, Mama," he whispered, his small voice echoing into a chorus of whispers. Elara shivered, pulling him closer. "There's no one there, sweetheart. It's just shadows." "He sees what we cannot," Kaya said softly, his own skin crawling. "The canyon plays tricks on the mind. It shows you what you fear most." Behind them, faint but clear, came the echoes of Borland's voice, twisted by the stone into something demonic and monstrous. "Kaya, I'll wear your skin for a saddle blanket. The boy is mean." The chase was on, but the rules had changed. The canyon was no longer just a hiding place. It was a trap for both the hunter and the hunted. A stone throat waiting to swallow them all. Kaya found the place his grandfather had described in his feverish tales, a hidden cavern concealed behind a petrified waterfall of ancient dry stone. They slipped inside, and the moment they crossed the threshold, the oppressive echoes ceased, replaced by a silence so profound it felt like a physical pressure on the ears. The only light was a faint glow from the star-dusted sky, filtering through a narrow crack in the cavern roof. As they huddled in the absolute darkness, the truth, long shackled by shame, finally spilled out. The weight of the canyon, the proximity of their pursuers, and the fearful trust in Elara's eyes broke the dam within him. "The Asa Banu is real," Kaya confessed, his voice hollow and echoing softly in the cavern. "But it is not a story of cursed gold. My grandfather was the guide. He led the Spanish to a rich silver vein, hoping for a fair trade. But the soldiers, they dreamed of El Dorado. When they found only silver a fortune in it, but not the mythical city of gold, they accused him of deceit. In their rage, they killed his wife. My grandmother. Elara gasped softly, her hand finding his in the darkness, a warm, human anchor in the sea of his family's grief. In revenge, Kaya continued, the words tasting of ash, he led them deep into this canyon. To the place where the silver was, he triggered a rock slide, burying them all. The mine was lost, and he carried the shame, the waiting shadow, until his death. He said the silver was stained with the blood of the greedy and the betrayed. Elara listened, her thumb gently stroking his knuckles. So there's no curse? Only a story of tragedy and a lost mine? The curse is the greed itself, Kaya said, his voice firming with the realization. It is what waits in the hearts of men like Borland and Silas. They think Sam, as the last direct descendant, holds a map in his blood, or that he will somehow lead them to it. It is all a madness born from a single bloody moment. The revelation changed everything. They weren't just running from a man. They were running from a myth, a ghost story that had taken root in a greedy man's heart. And myths, he knew, were far harder to kill than men. Outside, the distorted echoes of Borland's men grew louder, more frantic. They had found the entrance to the cavern. There is a way out, Kaya said, standing, a new resolve squaring his shoulders. A tunnel my grandfather used to escape. It leads to the heart of the canyon, to the very place where it happened. The rock slide? Elara asked, her voice tight with fear as she understood his plan. Yes, Kaya said, hardening in the dim light. It is time to end this, to bury the waiting shadow forever. The tunnel was low, narrow, and suffocating, carved not by man but by an ancient stream long since vanished. They moved in single file, the sound of their breathing loud in the confined space, the scent of wet stone and profound age filling their nostrils. After what felt like an eternity, the tunnel opened abruptly, and they stepped out into a vast circular amphitheater of stone. Open to the sky where the full moon cast a sickly, pale light dot in the center stood a massive, flat-topped black rock, towering over them like a natural altar. Scattered around it, half buried in the dust of decades, were the skeletal remains of Spanish conquistadors. A rusted morion helmet lay cocked on a skull. A skeletal hand still clutched the hilt of a steel sword. This was the place. The air was thick with the memory of violence. Before they could take a full breath, Borland and his 3 remaining men filed into the chamber from the main entrance, blocking the only way out they knew. Borland's face, slick with sweat and exhilarated by the hunt, was a mask of avaricious triumph. The altar of stone, he breathed, his voice reverent with madness. Just like the old man's journal said, his wild eyes locked onto Sam. Bring me the child. His blood will anoint the stone. It will show us the way. There is no gold, Borland. Kaya's voice echoed, strong and clear in the chamber. Only silver. And a grave. This is a tomb, not a treasury. Lies. Borland roared, spittle flying from his lips. The Apache always lies. The child is the key. He is the compass. As his men advanced, drawing knives and pistols, Kaya did the only thing he could. He ran to the far wall of the canyon, to a precariously balanced pillar of rock his grandfather had described the canyon's trigger. Elara, get Sam back, he yelled, his voice straining with effort. He threw his whole weight against the pillar, muscles corded and burning. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deep groaning shudder that seemed to come from the very heart of the earth, the pillar shifted. High above, a low rumble built into a deafening roar as a cascade of rocks and debris broke free, thundering into the chamber. The main entrance vanished in a cloud of dust and flying stone. sealing it shut and crushing one of Borland's men, whose scream was cut short instantly. In the chaos, as dust choked the air, Kaya drew his knife and charged. It was no longer about escape. It was about eradication. The time for running was over. The canyon chamber became a hell of swirling dust, falling stone, and raw violence. The moon, glimpsed through the settling cloud, cast a chaotic strobe-like light on the scene. Kaya moved like the warrior of his bloodline, a whirlwind of controlled fury. He met the first of Borland's men head-on, ducking under a wild pistol shot and driving his knife up and under the man's rib cage. The man fell with a gurgled cry. He turned to the second, a hulking brute who lunged with a bowie knife. Kaya sidestepped, using the man's momentum to disarm him and send him stumbling into a dark side tunnel. The man's terrified scream echoed for a moment before being silenced by the rumble of a secondary rock slide. Sealing the tunnel forever. It left only Borland. The big man stood near the ancient altar, his pistol raised but not at Kaya. He aimed at Elara, who was shielding Sam behind the great stone, her body a final, desperate barrier. "It's over, Apache." Borland spat, his face a grotesque mask of fury and frustration. "I may not get the gold, but I'll still have what I came for. I'll have my satisfaction." A single shot rang out, deafening in the confined, echoing space. Its report lasting for seconds, but it was not from Borland's gun. Borland staggered, a look of profound, almost comical shock on his face. He looked down at the blossoming crimson stains spreading like a dark rose over his heart. He dropped to his knees, the pistol falling from his numb fingers, then slumped forward onto the stone altar. His life's blood seeping into the rock. Behind him, Elara stood, a smoking Colt Navy revolver in her hands, a gun she had taken from the skeletal, metal-clad grip of a dead conquistador lying at the base of the altar. Her face was pale, her jaw set, her eyes blazing with a ferocity that eclipsed her fear. She had not just been protecting her child. She had been fighting for her family. Silence descended, broken only by the final settling of dust and Sam's quiet. Shuddering sobs. Kaya went to her, pried the ancient, heavy gun from her trembling hands, and pulled her into his arms. She buried her face in his chest, her body shaking with the aftershocks of what she had done. He held her tightly, his own heart hammering a rhythm of survival and a dawning, painful peace. He looked over her shoulder at the scene of the generations-old tragedy, now the site of their salvation. The curse of the Asa Banu, the waiting shadow, had been laid to rest. Not by gold or bloodletting, but by truth and a mother's sacrifice. As the first rays of dawn, clean and golden, filtered into the canyon, illuminating a new, previously hidden path out, Kaya looked at his family, the woman who had fought like a warrior, and the son who was his future. "The shadow is gone," he said, his voice firm with a certainty that would carry them for the rest of their days. "Now we go home."